Hi, today I want to show you how you can become a prompt expert in creating Nordcraft custom actions with the power of AI. Now, creating custom actions in Nordcraft can be accomplished using custom code, but if you're not a programmer, you're probably going to use AI to create those, which is completely fine. And today I want to show you how you can become a professional prompt engineer to engineer Nordcraft custom actions together with the help of AI. So let's get right started with that. Now, first of all, we need to understand how we're going to structure the prompt to get the best result. First of all, we want to make sure what the goal is. Your goal could be, I have a JSON array and I need to get a base64 string out of there to turn this JSON array into a CSV file. That's a valid prompt, right? That is the goal. That is the first part of the prompt. That explains what the AI needs to do. Then the question is, how does it need to work? We already had a little bit of how does it need to work in the goal, which sometimes happens, sometimes they're one. But the goal would be, or how does it need to work would be, that would be the how. I have a JSON array, and you probably want to provide a sample array. And you would say, hey, you would need to look at the key pairs, the key value pairs, the keys precisely in each object in that list, the keys like name, age, and so on and so forth. And you would need to turn those into the columns of the CSV file, right? And then you will just need to fill in the inputs in there. So that would be the how. And then I need this as a base64 string so I can work with that. That would be the how you're going to do that. And then you could say, and then I also want that to be downloaded, for example, to start a download. And then the input. Now I would give an example, say, hey, I need this input of an array like this with, the objects inside of there. That would be the list, the JSON list. And I would provide an example and would say, make it work generically, right? So it just works with any key value pairs. And then what does the output need to be, right? That would be, okay, the output would need to be a CSV file, and you could say, just do a CSV file, however you would do a CSV file, or you could upload into Claude, for example, an example CSV file with the colors and, like special formatting if you want it to be an Excel file or something. So, you can get creative with that. You could just open your Pages, your Numbers app on your computer or Excel and, create a sample CSV if you want anything specific about that. But for this example, I don't think we really need that. So now that we know how to make a good prompt and how to make it efficient, let's try putting this into practice. So let's go to Claude here. And we also want to make sure that we consider some things when we're using Nordcraft, and that is whenever we get data back, we want it to give us that data as a Console.log. We're going to turn the Console.log for this custom action into a CTX event, meaning a context event where we emit a custom event in Nordcraft because it is an event-based action system. But because AI is mostly going to mess that up, we're going to have it turn it into a Console.log. That's something that it already understands. That's common in programming. That's easy for us to identify in the code, so we can just rewrite that sentence, essentially, that line. It's less than a line. It's going to be a word, technically. So let's start the prompt. First of all, what are we trying to do? So let's start with the what. I'm going to say, I need a custom JS. And now I'm going to say, this is very important, vanilla JS. I don't want anything React. I don't want Node.js. I want vanilla JS for the front end. So I will say vanilla JS for front end. I need a custom JS, vanilla JS for front end. Code snippet. And then I also want to say no functions, because mostly when we're doing a simple linear workflow, AI tries to turn it into functions because it thinks you're trying to reuse it while working in a file of code, but Nordcraft is already wrapping all your custom actions into a function anyway, so you don't necessarily need to do that. So I'm going to say code snippet, and I'm going to say linear code with no functions. So now we have what? I need a custom JS, vanilla JS for front-end code snippet, linear code with no functions to convert a JSON array into a CSV file that will be, and now we need to have this that it can be downloaded. Now you probably want to do some research, but we want it to be precisely a file data URL into a CSV that will be console.log as a file data URL. That will be console.log. Now, console.log is important because this will give us a way to get an output and to have AI write the code in a specific manner that makes it usable for us in Nordcraft as a file data URL. Now, this would be the what? I need a custom JS, vanilla JS for front-end code snippet, linear code with no functions to convert a JSON array into a CSV file that will be console.logged as a file data URL. And then we're going to use the native go-to URL to download that file inside of Nordcraft. But we don't necessarily want those parts to be part of the custom action, because we can do those things natively in the Nordcraft ecosystem and make our code block more reusable and make it more native into the Nordcraft ecosystem. Now, the next thing is the process. So let's do the process. That would be the how. I would need to upload a JSON array with a variety of keys, and I would say I would need to do a JSON array of objects, right? Because we're putting objects in the array, because it's not just going to be an array of names, right? That wouldn't be a CSV. So we want to be precise and say array of objects with a variety of keys. And we don't need to put this here, with a variety of keys, and it will need to then turn it into a CSV, and then that CSV into a data file data URL. Okay, now the input would be, and I like saying hard code a sample data. I would say hard code a const. That would kind of like allow us in the code to declare a sample value. Hard code a const with a sample array. Now I would need to emphasize the array needs to be, the array will be flexible, meaning I need the code to work with any keys in the array objects. So don't hard code anything. There you go. Then we go with the output, and we're going to put the output inside of here. The output will be, I need a base 64 file data URL that would be ready to be opened in a new window and trigger the download. So we need to be very descriptive so it knows that this is what we're trying to do with it. But now I wanted to tell it, don't download it. I will do that myself. I will do that myself. It should just be console logged. There you go. I will do that myself. It should just be console logged. There you go. Perfect. And now I'm just going to say thanks because we want to be polite to the AI. And with such a prompt, when you really structure it, you're going to spend a little bit of time writing the prompt, but there's no back and forward. This is how you're going to one-shoot those things. So let's send the code and let's have it generate the code for us, and it will perfectly work. So let's see, we're going to get a sample array of the data, and now it's going to abstract the keys, it's going to flatten and map things, it's going to join them, it's going to create the CSV rows. Technically, you could do this in Nordcraft with a custom function, but there you go. And now we're going to log the data URL, and there you go. So now we have a few ways how we can build this. We could build this technically as a formula, but we could also do it as an action. I'm just going to do it as an action, right? Because I assume it's going to be a long base64 and don't necessarily have it, want it to be a formula, because then in the editor, every time I open the formula, it will run in the background and it's going to make the editor slow. So sometimes you want to turn certain things that would be a custom formula into a custom action, just so that they don't run in the editor when you don't need them, making the editor slower, especially when you're working with lots of strings and very long strings like base64. I found that's how you really optimize it, especially if you already have lots of elements on the page and lots of custom code running on there. So now let's copy this, what we got from Claude, and now we're going to create a custom action, and that will be array to CSV, and I'm going to create that. And now you see Nordcraft is going to give us this custom function. I'm going to paste the code inside of this custom function. That's why I said you don't need to give me a function. It's already in a function that's accessible by the NoCode interface from Nordcraft. We have the sample data inside of here already. And now we are going to have the code and we're going to get the result back inside of here. So now we see we're getting this console.log. Now, of course, there is no console.log available to us that will allow us to retrieve the data. So we need to make Nordcraft now retrieve the data from this custom code. And how we get the data outside of this custom code back into the Nordcraft ecosystem, in this example, which we could do a formula. If this would be a formula, we would write return and that would be it. But we can't do return. We can't just return the data URL in an action, right? And for some things like this, I prefer doing an action so it doesn't run every time I drag the editor of the formula. So let's create an event, and I'm just going to create that event on data, and that will just give me the base64 string. So I'm just going to copy this value that would be returned here, and I'm just going to, put that as a sample value inside of here that I can work with, so I get the preview in the Nordcraft editor. And then now, how do I emit this event with onData? Very simple, right? I'm going to just add ctx for context dot trigger action event, and then I'm going to put the event name inside of here in quotes, and then I'm going to add comma, and then I'm going to put the data URL inside of here that I want to return. So the first thing in this brace will be the event name. The second thing will be the data that we're actually emitting when we run this. Perfect. We're going to close that. And there you go. And then I'm going to say send data via ctx event. There you go. And now I have that. Now the question is, how do we get the dynamic input? Now, this is why I ask it to please give me some hard-coded data, so I can just remove this and now create a dynamic input for this custom code, right? Now, how do we add inputs? We add them using arguments. So let's create an argument. Let's call that JSON, or let's call that array, right? And now, because it will be a list, it will be type list. An array is a list. An object would be actually type unknown, just FYI. And now I'm going to add args.array, and this will give us the input. So we access the arguments in this custom code using args. args.array, that would be this input here, and that's how we dynamically get this right into here. Now, when you are working with inputs, I usually like to put an or inside of here, or just two straight lines in JavaScript with the empty value, just so that I have a fallback in case I need that. And then you can write a description. You can say convert JSON array into CSV file URL base 64. There you go. Base 64. There you go. And now I have this available and I can run this. So let's go on our home page and let's try this out. So let's create a variable with an array first. So let's get an array and let's put objects inside of this array. Let's do object. Let's do name, NoCode Pro Code, and I will do email, and I'm just going to do hey@nocodeprocode.com, and I'm going to say username nocodeprocode.com, and then I'm going to add another item. I'm going to do name Despia hey@despia.com, and then username is going to be Despia_native. I'm going to add a new name. Now I'm going to add Nordcraft. I'm going to do hey@nordcraft.com, and I'm going to do Nordcraft engine. There you go. So now I have my mini CSV as a JSON array. I'm going to call this variable JSON, and this could come dynamically from your backend or whatever, right? And now I will probably build a button so they can download it, right? So this is why I'm saying you don't need to have it run as a formula, because in the formula, if you preview the formula that you're downloading, every time you drag the canvas, it's reloading the formula for the preview. And if you're working with base 64, especially with large data sets, it's doing those calculations the whole time, creating the base 64, and that can, especially if you do it, you know, for extensive things, that can slow down the performance of your editor. So you also want to be mindful about, you know, maybe you want to run things asynchronously, and that would be sometimes doing it as an action if it is anyway bound to an event that executes, and you're already doing custom code, right? So that's just something to note. I don't think that we're going to have that many limitations and performance issues for this specific one, but it can add up if you have many chained to each other, right? Now, again, if you do multiple filters attached to each other, probably use formulas, but you know, this is a use case how I would do that. So let's go in here and let's say download CSV. Perfect. Now we have this button. I'm just going to make the button look pretty real quick. Won't take long. Let's just add gray 200, borders 0.5 rem. Ah, that looks beautiful. Look at that. So now I go to the button, I go on click. Now on this click event, I do array to CSV, and now I'm going to put the array inside of here, which is our JSON variable. You see, this is the argument, this is the input that we have defined, and this will be funneled back into the custom code. And then I have the onData, and then with this onData, I can just go inside of here, and now I'm going to go to URL, which I can use a native block. I don't need to do this in custom code, because the Nordcraft ecosystem natively has that available to me, so why abstract it more into code if I already have it available here? And then I'm going to open the event with the data URL. So now if I open the application and click inside of here, as you can see, I just downloaded the CSV, and now as you can see, here is the CSV. I opened it 2 times because I clicked twice on it, but now I just downloaded the CSV, as you can see, right inside of here. Now it's saying download, right, inside of here. I would be interested to see, does it write download somewhere inside of here? Oh, that's just the file name, right? So we could also give it a custom file name. Now we could reprompt that and say, hey, I want this file to be a custom file name, because I assume it has to set it somewhere in here. No, I don't see it. So let's say add a const with a custom file name. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back into Nordcraft, and I'm going to copy this custom action in here, and I'm just going to paste it in here and let's say add it to this code. Keep the format as is. I'm using a proprietary NoCode tool, that needs the structure to be like this. I'm just going to put that inside of here. And now I'm going to paste the code and say, just hard code the name for now. I like just hard coding it because it just makes it so much easier to manually replace it than to have the AI do it wrong and then you gotta figure it out. So you see, I got export.csv. Beautiful. So now I'm just going to copy that, and you see it maintained the CTX event, so I can just paste it, double check if I still have my event on here, which I have, and now I'm just getting the .csv. So now I'm also going to add name, and I'm just going to make that a string because that's text. Now I want to inherit .csv, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in backticks, and I'm going to now put a dynamic insert and do .csv, so I already have the file name, and now I'm just putting args.name, and if that would be null, I'm just doing or, and that would be then, I'm just doing download, in quotes, download. Okay, download. So now if I set a file name, it will inherit the file name and insert it here in this templated text. And if there's no file name, meaning it's null or undefined, it will just do download.csv. So now, if I take a look at that here, if I would click on here, of course, it would block opening the file URL and downloading it. But if I open it in a new tab and click on here, you see it downloads.csv. And now when I go inside of here and change this argument with the name and I say super cool download, right? And I click on here, it's now, it's not doing that. Let's see. Why is it not doing that? We got super cool download. Let's open the code. Sometimes there's a little bit of manual debugging. So let's actually try just putting the name manually inside of here, right? And let's try that. And let's just open that here. Let's run that. No, it still does download. So it actually doesn't change the file name dynamically. So let's just try having it hard-coded again. Let's do example.csv, example.csv, and that should give it the custom file name. So let's try reloading this, and let's run, and it will still say download.csv. So I'm going to copy the code as it is here, and I will go back to Claude and say, when I run this code, the file name is still download.csv, right? Because even though we set it inside of here. So let's go to Claude and let's see what Claude is telling us about that. The issue is that the file name parameter in the data URL isn't standardized and isn't reliably supported by browsers. To properly set the file name, you need to return both the data URL and the file name separately in your NoCode tool to handle it properly. Here's the updated. Okay, so we need the data URL and the file name, and then now the function returns. Okay, so it wants us to click on an A tag with the download attribute where we can put the file name inside of there. So let's say, what if I just do a go to URL? So because the intent is running this, if you're just doing the browser, it won't respect the file name in the data URL itself. However, you can create a blob URL with a proper file name using a different approach. Here's the modified code. So we could turn it into a blob. Now, if we turn a blob, oh, it's already cleaning that up. So that is fine. We're turning a blob, we're clicking on it. So this code is actually then manually doing the click. Now, if we don't really mind about the file name, we could have the native Nordcraft go to URL do that, but there's no native download action. So what I would actually do, I said, okay, perfect. Can we just keep returning the file data URL with no file name set, and then create a separate code snippet to download the file. And now I need to correct my grammar. Snippet separate to download the file, because I like the idea of breaking your code blocks when you generate them with AI in as much blocks as you can, so that you can reuse most of your code and you're not creating code that is dead just lying in there. You want to make things as reusable as possible. That's just going to be a little bit more work right now, but it's going to save you lots of time when you start rewriting the same code for all kinds of different things. And having a download action is pretty cool. So let's convert this into the base 64. That will not actually then need the file name, right? So we copy that part of the code and we go back into our custom action here. We can remove the name. That'll give us the data URL. Perfect. And now we will probably create a new custom action saying download data URL. Download data URL. And now we will take a look at the code. So in here, we have this code with the data URL, the file name, and this code will then download it and also clean up the blob URL, which is very important. So now I have download data URL in this custom function that Nordcraft gives us, right? We're going to paste the code inside of here. Await functions cannot be in modules on the top level of modules. Okay, so let's copy that. Now I'm saying, for the last function, I'm getting this error, and you put the error in quotes. And then under here, I'm also going to reference the whole code, right? Where I'm saying, keep in mind, I need to follow the tools guidelines for how to use custom code in their proprietary system. You want to remind the AI that you're working with a proprietary system, so it's not going to generalize how it works with the code and how it structures the code. That just usually gives you the best results when you're prompting that, right? So now when I copy the code here, and I copy that, it already now remembered that we're doing CTX events and all that, so let's paste that. And you see it actually now does CTX on trigger action with event with on error, and even gives us the error message, which is pretty cool. So there you go. And it already created the args data URL, args file name, which is pretty cool. Now let's just, we're already doing sample data, that's cool too. But let's create our custom arguments. I'm just going to create this URL, and that will be a type string. And I'm just going to call this args.url, right? I just, like naming my things myself. And then the file URL name, so the file name, that will be name. There'll also be a string. And I will just do args.name. There you go. And for this, I can just do a custom file name. I don't need that comment. That's the fallback, right? And then for the data URL, I don't think we need a sample data URL. It's already text. No, we don't need a fallback for that necessarily. We could do a fallback for an empty string. There you go. And then we're converting this. We're clicking on the link. Now we have this onData event, which it already nicely generated for us. I'm actually going to keep that. So I'm going to copy that here. I'm going to create my onData event. And now I'm doing file downloaded, file name. I don't necessarily need to send any data when it was successful. So I'm fine on that. So if I'm not sending any data, I'm just doing the example input as an empty object, so I can, I can work with the event. It's just going to make it simpler when it pre-suggests the events that are available to you. So I have this onData, and then I have onError. And then there is an error message. Now, it will give us an error, so we can use that. So download failed, and we get an error message. So for that, I can create a custom event on error. So I'm going to do on error. I'm going to say error message, error message. That's some nice output, right? And then I'm going to create a description for this. Download file data, download file from file data URL. Download file from file data URL. Now keep in mind, we're just doing example.csv, but you know, it works for every file. So we may want to generalize this, but I think let's do example.txt. TXT is usually like when you're doing like a example placeholder, right? Download file from file data URL. Now keep in mind, we also need to provide like dot to it, because like .csv, .txt, .cxlx, or whatever the thing is for Excel, right? So that we, you know, because the extension demands the format, right? And important, when you work with those things with the blob URLs, you need to clean up so it revokes it after it downloaded it. So that's very important. Now we have those two blocks, those one block that it wanted to use for us, we turn it into two blocks because then we can generalize it more and reuse it at multiple places where it may be appropriate to use it in the future. So now what I can do is I'm just going on the home page, I'm going on click, now I'm getting this data, and then on data, instead of going to the URL, I'm using my custom action to download the data URL. The data URL will come from the event right inside of here. The file name, I can hard code for now. I can do contacts.csv. Now important is you need to do .csv. If you want to do that dynamically, you could make a custom formula by just like doing concatenate, and you can put the file name, contacts inside of here, and then you can hard code the extension, or do it, make it dynamically based on the use case, right? And then on error, you can show an error message. We can also take a look at that. And then on data, you could do some confetti if you want. Actually, that's a good idea. Let's get the confetti package. Let's get the confetti package. Okay, let's go in here. And then we go on data. When it was successful, I'm going to run the confetti package. There you go. So now let's see if this works. Let's open the page. Let's click on download CSV. And as you can see, it downloaded it as contacts.csv. And you see now the file is contacts and it doesn't say download anymore. So let's delete that. So as you can see, we now have our custom CSV downloaded with two actions that are both reusable. And we get confetti when I click on it because it was successful. I don't think we're ever going to have an error come in here, but we also have the error event with a custom error message that we could use to then display. Now, to make that complete, you can just do a browser alert, and I can just write that myself. I'm just going to do a browser alert, which is like, if you can't write JavaScript, I will guarantee you can write a browser alert, because it is alert, and then inside of here you put the alert, which would be message as type string, and then you're going to do args.message or no message as a fallback. I'm curious why they don't have an alert yet in Nordcraft, but yeah. And then we can go inside of here after we run this custom action, which is a Lego block, and this download data URL is fully reusable. And then on error, we now also have this reusable browser alert, which can get the event data with the custom message. Look at that. It's like Lego. They still don't have the alert, right? No, it's my browser alert that I created. So they still natively support the alert. Interesting. But there you go. Now you can download the file, and it will get a custom file name with two actions, both built by AI. That's the future. there you go. And this is how you're going to master prompting custom actions in Nordcraft. One thing to consider, if you want to import NPM packages, tell it to use import statements. And if it's not available to download that NPM package by an import statement and you're trying to use that action in a component, just tell it to append that script tag as HTML using JavaScript into the header, and make sure that it only does it if it hasn't already done it. So in case it runs multiple times, so we could define like a global window object to track that state, because then you don't want to put it essentially on the header when you're loading it in a component, because then you can't test the custom SDK functionality inside of your component. You would have to wait on the component and have it on the main page. But that's something we can talk about in another video. But thank you so much for watching. I hope that you learned a lot. And if you want to learn even more about Nordcraft, you can take a look at NoCodeProCode.com, which is a beautiful place where you can join, and you're welcome to join, to learn more about Nordcraft, to build your applications faster, and to get unstuck should you ever face any roadblocks. Now, I can't wait to see you inside of the community. And regardless of if you join or not, you're always welcome on this YouTube channel, and I hope that I'm providing a great value to you through this YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate that, and see you in the next video, and maybe, who knows, maybe even in our next office hours. Take care.